Hello and welcome to the first part of the forest tutorial. The first thing I'm going to talk about is textures, because there's an awful lot of textures in this scene, and this is a group of textures that you need to get hold of. Not exactly these ones, but something similar. And we have some bushes, we have fern, we have a pine, and they are PNGs, and they are PNGs because they have a transparent background. If I open this one up in GIMP, you'll see what we've got. What we've got is this transparent background, and on it we've got a bush that's been cut out of an image. And this is something you can do easily yourself. You can also find them online by just putting in things like pine tree or bush or things like that. But make sure the image, obviously, that you take is one that's free to use. So that's our plant textures, and we've also got a ground texture for near to the camera, which basically is a forest floor type texture, and this one is a seamless texture that I've created myself from an online photograph. This is quite easy to do. I'll go into how to do that in another tutorial very shortly. I've also got a rock texture, which has got a bit of moss with it, and a tree bark texture, because I'm going to have to make a tree that's close to us. This is something I didn't do in the original one that I did, but it definitely is something that's lacking. There's no trees that are very close, so there's going to be one tree that's very close to the camera, and we're going to make that, and it's not really going to have any leaves on it because the camera won't see them. And that's the textures that you want to prepare or get hold of before you start this tutorial. So let's start. I'm going to delete the cube. I might as well turn the screencast keys on. There we go. So we're starting with just the light and the camera. Now there is an add-on to make landscapes, but I don't like it. Firstly, you don't have much control over the landscape. You can spend ages tiddling around with all the parameters to get the landscape look roughly what you want, but it's never going to be exact. So I prefer to create my own. And another reason I prefer to create my own is geometry. The landscape generator creates a huge amount of vertices and points and all the rest of it, and to be honest, you can get away without doing that, especially in a scene like a lake, where a lot of the scene is the lake bed, and that doesn't really need much in the way of geometry. So let's get started, and we're going to add a plane, and this is going to be our landscape. Now there's going to be two bits of landscape. There's going to be some distant mountains, and there's going to be the actual lake, and I'm going to start off with doing the lake. The mountains are made exactly the same way. So here we go. I'm going to scale that right the way up, so it's about the same size as the grid area. That's a good sort of size to play around with, I've discovered. Right, so the first thing we want to do is go into edit mode, and we're going to add in a few vertices. We're going to subdivide it, not that many times. There, and that's enough to start with. Okay, and we're going to create a rough shape, and this will be a rough shape. So we need a depression in the middle. So I'm going to select some points in the middle here, and this depression obviously is going to be our lake. Don't worry too much about it. This is just sort of a roughing out stage. Actually, it'd be quicker if I use circle select. And I'm going to have kind of an L-shaped depression, I think. Something like that. I wanted to bring it a bit closer here. That'll do fine. So, hit escape to get out of there, and go down, down, down. And that is roughly the sort of scene that we're looking at. And we're going to be looking at it from this direction, so I want to set the camera up first, because a lot of things, sorry, I need to go into object mode. A lot of things are going to be valid only really from the camera's point of view, so it's a good idea to set the camera up the way you want it. So view, align view, align active camera to view, and we're almost there. And I'm gonna hit G for grab, and I'm gonna move the camera up. And this is going to be quite a distant shore, so I'm actually going to scale this whole plane now a little bit more. Go back view camera. Yeah, that's kind of more like what I want. And I'm going to move the camera back. So if I look from the top here, something like that. And I'm not going to worry too much about these two sides, because this is going to go up into sort of like a hill. And let's show you how I plan on doing that. So, I'm going to reselect that. I'm going to go into sculpt mode. Now, for those of you who've never used sculpt mode, it's actually easier than you think. Let's just get into a better view of what we're doing. I'm going to adjust the light a bit actually, because we go back into object mode, because you can't really see what you're doing. So because the display here basically is OpenGL, it does depend a little bit on lighting. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to give the plane also a bit of a material so it starts to absorb light. Oops, wrong thing. That's better. And make it a little bit browny, but that's not obviously the end colour, because we're going to have several materials on our ground here, not just the one. Okay, so I want to turn the sun up a bit, make it a little bit more obvious as to what's what. And let's go back into sculpt mode. Right, it's a little bit easier to see what we've got now. Now, sculpt mode, invariably the first thing that I'll use, if you click on there, you get a whole load of different brushes you can use, and it's worthwhile playing around with them. But I find about the most useful one is this clay strips. And what this does is it adds onto the top of the surface. Now, at the moment, things are so huge that we're not going to be able to do a lot. So what I want to do is I want to enable a thing called dynamic topology. What that does is it subdivides as it needs it. And how big? Well, it's based on pixel size. If I take this down to 21, you can see that if we do that, then we can set this to 20 pixels. I can enable it, and you can decide whether to subdivide edges, collapse the edges, or what you want to do. And I suggest you leave all that well alone. So let's have a look at cameras here. So our hills are going to be over here, so let's start adding some geometry. So you can see that we're actually starting to add some geometry now. And we're starting to get some quite gentle hills. But we want them a bit less gentle. We want a bit more detail in them. So I'm going to take that detail level down to maybe 10 pixels. And let's sculpt a bit more in there. And you can see all this heavy geometry is really only going around the edge. I'm trying not to touch the middle because that's going to be under the water, and who the heck cares, if you know what I mean. So that's good. It's a good start. If we do view from the camera, and you can see what we've got. So that's a pretty good start. In fact, that will probably be good enough. There's a few areas that want some correction. I want to make this higher actually here. So let's make it higher. There we go. And this here wants to go a little bit. View camera. Because we've got the edge of the mesh visible there, I don't really like that, but I can't really make it any lower because it's going to look a bit silly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the edge here by going into edit mode. And circle select. I'm just going to run my circle along here. Like so. Hit the escape key, E for extrude, and let's just extrude it in that direction and that direction, and that will be good enough. Remember, a lot of Blender is all about setting a scene, and what you're doing really is not so much creating the scene as it exists, but creating like a theatre set, but a very realistic theatre set. And for our theatre set, this is going to be fine as a basis, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface onto that in a minute, and that's all we need to do for the actual basic ground. So go back into object mode. Let's add a modifier, subdivision surface. Make the view the same as the render, otherwise you're not really sure what you're getting. You can set it back again later if you want to. But you can see what we've got. You can see it's all a bit too glinty at the moment. We haven't finished the material. Not a problem really. Yeah, that looks fine. And if we go back view camera. Now I said, you know, floor nearest the trees, and the floor nearest the trees is really going to nearest the camera, and the floor nearest the camera is going to be over here, because I'm going to start, do what I did with the other scene, I'm going to start over here somewhere, I'm going to pan to the right. Okay. Now what I want is I want kind of a mysterious place where you can't really quite see past it here in the distance. So I want like either a spit of land or a number of rocks or something coming out here, and I've chosen to do rocks this time. The last time I did like a spit of land, so this time I'm going to do some rocks, and there's a number of ways of doing this, and one of the best I've found is just simply to take a cube and play around with it. So that's pretty boring. I'm going to show you the first one that I do, and then after that it's entirely up to you, but I'm basically going to pause the video while I do the rest of the rocks. So we start off, and we're going to check we're in object mode, which we are. add a cube, and we're going to add a bit of geometry to the cube, same as we did before, by going into edit mode, hit subdivide a couple of times, no more than that. Then I'm going to scale the cube to roughly the size I want, and I'm going to give you a good tip in a minute, but hey, it's going to be in a minute. And let's make it kind of like, this is going to be quite a large rock. Actually, I'll subdivide it again because we want a fair few vertices on this for what we're about to do. And what we're about to do is add a deform monitor, a modifier. But before we do that, I'm going to make it into sort of like a slightly more curvy shape, and the way to do that is go into mesh, transform, and there's lots of different things here, but what we want is just sphere, and as you can see I can make it completely spherical or just bulge it a bit. I'm going to just bulge it a bit, and as you see now I've got this kind of shape here, and I'm going to add in a displace modifier, and the texture I'm going to use is going to be a new one. And you'll find that Blender knows when you do this. I'm going to rename that to Rock Displace, Rock Dis. You'll find that when you do this, Blender knows if you go straight to texture, then it's a displace texture that you want. And I'm going to use kind of a texture like this, and we'll leave that as it is. Now you can't really see it until you go into object mode. Ooh. And that is clearly too much, so reduce it down. And that's probably okay, especially if we add a subdivision surface on that. And that's going to be our big rock, huge massive great rock type thing. And I'm going to apply that because I'm going to edit it, play around with it. So that's giving me a nice starting point for this big rock. And if I view top, and I'll move it around into about the position that I want it. Which is kind of like that. And I'm going to expand it out in that direction. I'm going to rotate it round. I'm going to shift it around a bit more. And it doesn't matter if it's sort of off the ground a bit, because the water level is going to be somewhere around about here. So what matters more is that it looks like the sort of thing that we can just about see past, and gosh, there's something pretty interesting happening further down, but we can't quite see it. Just adds some interest into the composition. How does that look from the camera? Yeah, there's going to be sort of like a hidden area behind here, so that's cool. That's what we want. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Sculpt to actually create a more rock-like shape from it. So we're going to Sculpt. I don't want that. What I want is crease. What this is doing is it's deepening some of the gashes in the rock to make it a little bit more jagged, because we're going to lose some of the jaggedness in a minute when we go and put a subdivision surface on it. So that's our main huge massive rock, and I'm going to leave it at that for this shape, and I'm going to put a subdivision surface on it, and I'm going to come out of air and go into object mode, and render is going to be in this case only 1 because there's no point in having it massive. So let's put a material on it. So it's going to be a new material. I'm just going to call it Rock 1, and it's useful renaming some of these things. I'm going to give it a unique colour, so but that'll only happen in the viewport, because the colour really is going to be determined by the texture. Now the specularity needs to go right the way down, and it needs to be reasonably soft. Maybe a bit more specularity than that. And we want to set it to smooth shading, and you can see already what the shape is like. And in fact, if I leave it as smooth shading, what's it like if I remove that subsurf? If I click on the eye here, actually it probably looks better if I keep the subsurf on. So I'm going to keep the subsurf on. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't with rocks. Now we're going to texture, and I had that rock texture if you remember. So it's going to be an image. Click on both so that we get both. Click on the cube because I'm going to use it as a cube projection. I try and avoid UVs wherever possible, not because I can't do them, but because they take up extra time, and to be honest, you can very often get a very good result without it. So let's open up our image, desktop, and I'll call the place Lake where I'm saving all these things. And where are we? Rock and Moss, that's the one. And we're going to make it a cube. Colour is 100%, that's fine. Geometry, should make it a bit more than that, somewhere around the 0.7. So that's absolutely fine. If we do a test render, you can see we've got a reasonably realistic rock. At the moment it's bouncing back a bit too much light, so I'm going to take the intensity down. Take the specular intensity down. That's something like that. That's a pretty good rock. But the details are too big. So in actual fact we want to make this texture so that it scales smaller, and there's a number of ways of doing that, but the easiest one is just to adjust the way that it's mapped, and map it multiple times. So if we go down here, something like that, still not small enough. That's better. It's a much better thing. Okay, and water level is going to be somewhere around about there. So that's the first rock, and I'm going to do a few more rocks, and they're going to be done the same sort of way, and with the exception that yeah, I'd better show you the first of the small rocks I'm going to do. So let's add a cube. I'm going to show you the first part of the first small rock that I'm going to model. I'm going to add a cube, and this is going to be a smaller rock. It's going to be about half the size, so if I scale it to about half the size, something like that. And while we're still here, I'm going to make that bigger in one direction. and let's lift it up. View selected, so we can see it, and it's just a cube, which isn't very interesting. But if I go into edit mode, I'm going to make this one kind of wedge shaped. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to scale that way. Then I'm going to shift these down. So I've got a kind of wedge shaped rock, and this is the basic shape of the rock. It's not going to be, I'm going to have some wedge shapes, some rounds, but they'll all be done the same way. Okay, and they'll all be different sizes, and some of them are going to be put in as particle systems. So let's go out of edit mode into, no, we're not yet. We're going to give it some more geometry. Subdivide again. Oops. Control Z. Whenever you subdivide, you need to make sure you've got all of your objects selected. If that's what you want to do, otherwise it only subdivides the bit that's actually. Yeah, one more time. Shall I one more time? No. Let's leave it the way it is. The lower the polygon count, obviously, the better it renders. So we'll go back into modify, add modifier, and displace again, and rock displacement texture, which we're using, which is just marble, and texture coordinates, instead of local, we're going to make those global. We'll go into object mode, which will show us the effect of the deform, which obviously is too high at the moment. Okay. That's okay. Now, if you use this displacement modifier and you keep it in here, then what happens is, because it's got global, the rock will change its shape a bit depending on where it is and indeed what rotation it's in. And this is obviously very useful, because it means you can have the same rock, place it in different places, and you have different shapes. And that's really what I'm doing. And so if I put a subdivision surface on there, you can see we're going to have rocks that are generally the same shape but are subtly different. And this is very useful indeed. So I'm going to go off and create some more rocks, and while I do that, you're going to be on pause. Right, as you can see, I've made a few rocks. Now I'm going to scatter them around in general on this plane here, and I'll be able to delete ones I don't want, and they're going to be much smaller sized. And the ones I've actually done have been positioned where they're going to be in the final actual image. So you can see there, and the water level of the lake is going to come around about there. In fact, I think to make you see the water level better, I'm just going to add a plane for where the water level is. So scale that up, and we'll raise it until we get to where the water level is going to be, which is about there. You can see where everything's going to be. Now let's just hide that for the moment. I'm going to move that onto another layer by hitting M. So that gives us a reference for my water line, really. It's not going to be actually the water, we're going to use the ocean modifier for that. So we want a particle system. Well, no, first thing we want to do is create a group of rocks. I'm just going to use these three rocks. So if I click on these, shift clicking allows you to select multiple, so I've selected these rocks here, and because they're different sort of sizes and things and shapes. So I'm going to press Control G, create a new group of them. I'm going to create the group, we're going to call it Rocks. ROX. I love misspelling things in Blender. And now I'm going to hit the plane there. I'm going to give the plane a particle system. This is only going to be a temporary particle system. We'll get rid of it in a minute. And it's a new one. And we want, I don't know how many rocks we want. We'll play around with that in a minute. It's going to be faces, random, start one, end one. You can see at the moment the rocks are pretty small, not even showing up. No physics, that's better. And we got them all over the lake, which doesn't actually matter because we're just going to delete the ones we don't want. So more than that or less? I think we want less. I think we want something like this. And we're going to give them a random rotation. Random phase. Random size. Turn the size up until they're pretty visible. Actually we can't see them yet because we've not put them in as rocks. So we want to go down to render here, group, duplicate group, rocks. Whoa, too big. Right, let's set the size down. We want them big enough so that they're visible, but not huge. Big enough so that they're visible. That's fine. Random rotation's good. And just get it the way you like it. And then when you've got it the way you like it, I'm going to go into the modifiers, and you can see here we've got particle system, and hit convert, and that will convert all these rocks into real things like that. And then we can get rid of the particle system itself. There. So now we've got a whole bunch of rocks, and loads of them are in a place where we don't really want them. So what we want to do is we want to delete those that we don't want. There's an easy way of doing that, and that is simply by taking this here plane, and we're going to take the plane and we're going to move it to a separate layer. But we want to make sure that all we've got is the plane selected first, otherwise we're going to move all the rocks. So we hit the A key to deselect everything. Just select the plane, M for move, put it in an unused layer. As you can see, we've got all our rocks. Now we know that this here in the middle we don't want, so we can just use circle select, and we can get rid of all these rocks that are in the middle here. We don't want them, they're never going to be seen, except for maybe a few around there. So we know we can get rid of all those. Now here on the left we're going to have a forest floor, so we know we can get rid of the rocks there. Except for maybe a few that just jut out into the lake a bit. So we've got rid of those. We're going to have forest over here, so we can get rid of those rocks. And Lord knows what we're going to have over here, but I don't think we need that many rocks, so I'm going to get rid of a few of them. There's too many up there. Right, now let's bring back my body to me. Right, bring that back. View camera. And there we go, we've got a whole bunch of rocks and they're scattered around. And that's pretty good. If I render that now. You can see the whole effect there. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to give this whole ground here a texture. Now I'm going to leave it the same colour, but I'm going to finalise one of the materials for the ground. It's not the only one. This is the first material that's going to go on the ground. I'm going to use a texture which I didn't show you before because it's one of the standard textures that I use all over the place. I've called it mud, and it's basically just it's mud. So new texture, and I've used this loads of places, this texture, really have, and all I did was just took a picture of some ground and mucked about with it until it was a bit tileable. It's not completely tileable, but it's good enough for a basic ground texture. Now where are we? 3D, M for mud. There it is, mud. You can see what it's like. It's a bit light, so normally I have to play with it to darken it down a bit. Not that far. Maybe something like that. Play with the saturation. And this lets me adjust it to whatever colour I want, whereas if I'd have saved it as dark, it would be more difficult. So that's where we are. This is quite big, so I'm going to repeat it. Where are we? Flat's okay, no, we want a cube. Alright. We want it to influence the normal. Reasonable amount. And we want our repeats to be something like, I don't know, 20. See what that looks like. As you can see, we're now taking a bit longer to render, and 20 is too much. Okay, let's go down 10. I mean, eventually this scene will take around about 5 minutes a frame on my PC to render. Yours it may be quicker. Well, that's probably about right. And what I'm going to do is I am then going to go back into materials because it's all too shiny. It's all too intense. I'm going to knock that back, knock the hardness back. So if we render that again, you see it's starting to look better. At the moment I think our sun is too bright, but we can't really fix that until we do something about what our sky is going to be. And in fact, if we get rid of, don't know, turn down the sun a bit. I love saying things like that. How about turning down the sun? .2, let's make it 2, give it a bit of yellow, render image again. See, when you've got light that's just too bright, then it's very difficult to see what you're actually doing. So, there we go. So that's that. And that looks fine as it is. So on to trees. Now trees I'm going to do a similar way to what I've done with rocks. For those of you who haven't got images with planes turned on, I suggest you do that. It's very useful. I leave it turned on all the time. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my main pine trees. So if I import images as planes, now we need to set this up so that it's actually a transparent background, and here's the steps you need. Here's the steps you need to do that. Why has it got a particle system? I do not know. Shouldn't have. Right. So here's the steps you need to do that. What you need to do is go into textures, show alpha, and that should show you your alpha values. Both. Then come down here, use alpha. Then a bit further down, just check that use alpha is actually selected. A bit further down, tick alpha as well as colour. You'll see it's still not transparent, and that's because we need to alter the actual material settings. And what I want to do is I want to knock the intensity and the diffuse intensity back. Make the diffuse intensity rather green, not too green, but a little bit green. Set transparency, wants to be Z transparency, not ray trace. Alpha to 0, which makes it a transparent background. And there we go. Now the other thing I like to do with these trees is I like to give it a bit of normal geometry. Like so. And that just starts to make it look like it's actually leaves instead of a blurry thing. And reasonable intensity, quite hard, so it just picks up on individual leaves, and that's fine. That'll do for that. So if we go to view selected, see at the moment it's in the wrong direction. There's no big surprise there. Oh, something else you have to do on nearly all the materials in this scene, because we're using transparent backgrounds on trees and things, is under the shadow setting in the material, click receive transparent. And I've forgotten to do that for some of the other things, so I'll do that now. add to our tree. Let's stand that on end. The way you do that is 90 and there. And now we want to move it somewhere where it's not going to be seen, because this is only going to be a particle system, and we're not, because there's going to be a lot of all these plants, we're not actually going to create them as instances this time. We're not going to make them real. So, object mode, edit. The reason I'm doing that is I want to give it a subdivide. I want to subdivide it just the once, and you'll see why in a moment. And the reason why is I'm going to apply the displace modifier to it, and the displace modifier, it doesn't really matter what you use. I might as well use the rock one. It doesn't really friggin' matter. Object mode. As you can see, that's far too much. I just want to make it just very slightly bend around a bit depending on where it is, and that makes every tree look different. And we're going to smooth shading, and now I need to make that vertex there actually the origin of the tree. So if I select that, snap cursor to selected, go back into object mode, object, transform, origin to 3D cursor, and this just makes sure that it sits right on the landscape. Now, one final thing to do, I'm going to duplicate it and rotate it, but it's going to be rotated on the same axis, and there's a very good reason for this, and that is because this will help make our trees stand out a bit. Oh, and I mustn't forget, that has got to be a global texture, that has got to be a global texture as well. The reason for that obviously is that the trees will then be different in different places. So that's our tree. Now to test that, we're just going to go, and what I want to do is I want to weight paint this area so that the trees are actually only put where I want to, because it makes no sense to put trees in the middle of the lake. So I'm going to go into weight paint, check the time on add, check that the strength is quite high, not all the way up, give myself a decent sized brush, and where is it? I want trees. I want trees all the way over here, I want trees around through here, I want trees over here, and I want trees over there. And the red areas are areas where there's definitely going to be trees, and the other areas are areas where, well, might be or might not be. And that's kind of the effect that I'm looking for. So I don't want any trees in front of the camera, because that's going to blot things out. I do want some trees and stuff around here. So that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to come out of there, go to object mode, I'm going to go here. Now if you go into data, you'll see that you've got an automatic vertex group created, and that's the weight painted group that you've just done. So it might be a good idea to rename that. Double click, I think, yeah, double click to rename it, and tree dense. So that's what it is. It's the density of forest in that area. So going to add in a new vertex group. Let's going to be emit from vertices or faces, it doesn't really matter. Random. No velocity, because the trees ain't going anywhere. Rotation, a little bit of random in there. Phase, a little bit of random, only a little tiny bit, just enough to make every tree slightly different. And we need, once again, render. It's going to be, well, it's actually going to be a group eventually. I'm going to set it to an object for now because we're only testing this. And I need to go back and edit my tree. View. Something I forgot to do. I need to join these two together. So shift, right click the other one, join, so they're one single object. Okay, and I'm going to, it's already called pine, so that's okay. What the hell, might as well group it because I've got it all selected. So Control G, trees, and so here we are. Group trees, random, because I always have that when I'm on groups, and no physics. Start one, end one. You can see all these little dots that have appeared. That's where our trees are. We don't want our trees there, we want them where we wanted them. And somewhere down here there is actually a setting. If I can find the damn thing. Get rid of that, get rid of that. Vertex groups, there it is. Density, tree dense. You see immediately that's changed, so that hopefully we haven't got trees in the middle of our lake. If we have, we're going to have to go back into Vertex Paint and play around. So we can't see them. We can't see them because they're too small. And here they come. Now, as you can see, the rotation is all over the place. So what we want to do, use objects rotation for duplication. You can see we've got, probably depends how big you want your trees to look, but I mean obviously there's too many of them there by a long way. So let's turn up random size so they're all different sizes. And you can see all those trees if we were to render that now. There we go. Now we're getting to the stage where we actually need to do something here, and what we need to do is we need to put in a sky, because that's going to affect a lot of things. So let's go over to our world settings, click real sky, and I'm going to open up textures, and you can download a picture of the sky from practically anywhere, and new, it's going to be image, and I've got a number of skies that I quite often use, all different colours, and I'm going to pick one that's quite a different colour this time. Click on both so you can see the effect of it, and open. Find your sky image, so you can have a sunset. Sunset might be nice actually. You can see what that's like. Now, the thing to remember, and this is what people forget when they start doing this, is influence. And so you need to click the horizon, zenith up, zenith down if you've got transparent ground, but we haven't. And there we go. If we go back to our world, you see that that's what this is going to look like. So if we re-render that now, you can see that's all very different. And we need to adjust our lighting, and this is usually the sort of time when I might do that because our shadows are too sharp. Anyone who knows me will know that I absolutely hate sharp shadows. So let's go to our sun. We want to adjust the angle of the sun and where it is, because at the moment it's not quite coming, I don't think, from the right place. It's not quite the right colour, and it's definitely not low enough. So I'm going to drop it down. We're going to change the rotation on this so that it's coming from the side like that. We're going to change the colour of it to be a little more red. Not quite that much red. Like so. We're going to take the energy down to 1. And let's try that again. Now we haven't quite got enough sun. And I think this texture's ran the very wrong way for some reason. So let's start this again. World. World texture, yeah it is, it's ran the wrong way. I've decided I don't really like that, so I'm going to have a different. Let's try that one. That's better. Now that gives me a problem because our major source of light is obviously somewhere over here. Trying to think how I corrected that the last time. I think it's image mapping. No, mapping. Oh, there we go. Offset coordinates X, which is that direction. Try that again. that's better. Now our main light is over there, no, it's over there somewhere. Okay, let's move it around the other way. And as I've said before, a lot of using Blender is basically fiddling around with things like this until you get it right. Moved it too far. That's good enough for me. However, it still looks like the light is coming from over here rather than over there, so I'm going to have to move the sun. It's so nice to have so much control over a world that you can actually move the sun around, I think. And in practice you don't really have to move it like that, but I like to. To me it seems more logical, and you can see where the sun's rays are actually going. And I'm going to turn that back up to 2. And this part of the setup is very important. So now I've got too little light coming in, so I need to move it up. Everything basically is in shadow at the moment. It doesn't help that it's red, because that's not going to show very well, is it, on trees? I'll show you in a minute what difference that makes. So there we are, that's a bit better. And this is a bit too red still. It's making too many things red. So we'll go around here a bit, move it closer to the centre, make it a bit lighter, but still towards the yellow end. Render one last time, and that should be it. Good. Now the next thing we want to do is sort out the shadows. At the moment we're outside, so really we want blue shadows. Sounds strange, but that's true. So shadow wants to be a dark blue. Okay. We want to turn up the sampling to about 5 or 6, maybe 7. Turn up the size to at least 4, and that will give us soft-edged shadows then. So if we render it again now, if you look at it and see the shadows, we render it again now and things will change. And of course, once again, it takes a bit longer because we're doing more things. We're making the shadows soft, and that in Blender will take longer time. But there you go. Now, you can have more than one particle system on an object. Now, I'm going to use that because I quite like the layout of the trees I've got. I'm just going to add a second type of tree to that trees group, and then I'm going to put in some bushes, and I'm going to do that exactly the same way that I did previously. So I'm not going to bother to show you that, because it's just a repeat of what I've already done. Right, here we are. What I've done is I've added some bushes using a separate particle system all around the edge of the forest. I've made the trees a little bit bigger, and I've introduced a second type of tree just for some variety. I've also moved a few of the rocks around to make things look better, and I expect I'll continue doing that as time goes on. Now at the moment the scene's a little bit dark. Fortunately there's an easy fix for this, and that is to use the sky texture here to provide some light. And how you do that is you simply go into your world settings, come down here, environmental lighting, change it to sky texture, and energy, maybe 2. We just want it to fill in the shadows really. So I'll re-render that and we'll see what it looks like. And there you go. I've had to turn the environmental lighting actually up to 3 rather than 2. And as you can see, it's much better. There's now some infill in the shadows. You can see things that are in the shadows. And that looks pretty nice. So, the next thing I want to do is apply some more materials to this horrible muddy thing here. And in order to do that, I need to show and hide the render view, and I'll select it. Did I actually rename it? No, it's still just called plane, so I'm going to call it ground. It's a good idea to rename things as you go along so you don't get confused. Go into edit mode. Before I do that, the actual lake, which was that plane that I had on, I want to move that back from where it was. So go back to object mode, M for move it to the first layer. Now we can see where our ground level is. Reselect our ground, edit mode, and now what we're going to do is we're going to apply another material, but it's just going to be where the lake is, just round where the lake is. And in order to do that, what I want to do is I want to increase the real mesh underneath the subdivision mesh, because otherwise it's going to look rather weird. So let's go into the settings here. You can see we've got our subdivision settings on, and I'm going to hide that and select all, A, no I'm not. So in order to keep the number of vertices that I want to a minimum, I'm going to circle select all around the edge of the lake. Like that. Hit escape. I'm going to subdivide those vertices. So now we've got a dense ring of vertices around the edge of the lake, and this will let us select in a moment for our other material. So I'm going to hit circle select again, C, going to reduce the size of it, and I'm just going to whiz around the edge of the lake. Because we want a somewhat different texture around these edges. Sort of gravelly, I guess, would be the best way to put it. So we've selected the edge, and that's given us something, and I want the bottom of the lake to have the same sort of texture, so just in case we can see through the water to it, we probably won't be able to, but it's a good idea. So I'll go back into object mode. The reason I'm doing that is I want to get rid of the actual lake again. M, and we go back into, oops, then we reselect our ground and go back into edit mode, and you can see those vertices are still on. And I'm going to do circle select. This time I'm going to make it bigger. I'm going to select the whole bottom of this lake, like so. And that's going to be totally different material. So I hit escape to come out of there, go into material. Going to add a new material. I'm going to assign it, and you can see that's changed colours all the way around there. And this is going to be sort of like pebbles, so I'm going to give it a texture. It's going to be a photo texture, and from my normal texture library that I use, I've just got an image of like lake bottom pebbles. And I keep all of this stuff in one place, and I'll try to, there you go, lake bottom pebbles. And I try to make it so that the files are easy to find. I actually call them what they are, like P for pebbles, rather than what they would have been before. Like if I've downloaded them, they might very well be some kind of stone texture type. We want to go in cubic again. Possibly actually spherical might work better on this one. And we want to go and add a whole bunch of these. Because it's quite a large area, we don't want it looking like there's huge stones, even if there are. So that's that. As you can see, it's quite obvious in here that this is a tiled texture. And if I'm going to render, and we'll just render it until we see an area to see what it looks like. I think maybe that actually it would be better as a cubic projection. Or who knows, I might even have to UV texture it. That's okay, that's a start. And remember, this is only a start point. I'm going to be adding other textures on top of this. This is just giving really a little bit of colour variation, and I'm going to turn that down now. Colour variation, I'm going to turn the geometry up a bit. And I'm going to add another texture. Clouds. Might as well use clouds. I'm going to stop it, and this texture is going to affect only the geometry. I'm going to make the geometry quite rough. I'm going to make the cloud size quite small, so it's that sort of effect. And I'm applying both of those to the material at the same time. As you can see, we've got this kind of pebbly effect with some colour variation. This one's turning right the way down. Specular hardly wants to be any. What there is wants to be quite hard. So, do that again. And it's worth remembering that this preview only gives you a rough idea of what Blender thinks it might be like. It's not going to actually generate at all the real thing as in the animation or the render. So now I want to change this colour. I'm going to change it to kind of a orangey brown. It's going to be quite dark, and we'll re-render until we get the colour that we want. And this is going to take a bit of playing around, as many things in Blender do. And bear in mind, this pattern piece here, we're not going to see. That's going to be at the bottom of the lake bed. But if I want to change that, that's easy enough. Normally I wouldn't bother because I know that area is not going to be seen. But what we can do is we can add yet another texture. New. This time we're going to have one called Magic. Let's stop that. You can see what Magic does. It's shaded various areas, different colours. Obviously at the moment they're horrific colours and we don't actually want those colours. So what we have to do is change them. And the way we can change them is by literally changing the values. That's one way of doing it. Increase the depth to make it more different colours. We can make it more turbulent, like so, so that it's less obvious. And we can take the colour influence down, so it's only 0.5 or 0.4, something like that. In this case we're not going to change the geometry. And I believe we can change the... I'm not sure if we can change the size directly on this, but anyway, if we render now, see what happens. You see we've got areas of wildly differing colour. That's okay. But that's not what we want, so we're going to have to turn down this colour influence right the way down. And you can turn it down and then watch what happens to your render, because it will actually keep rendering. You can see we've now got fairly subtle colour changes across the whole thing. You can watch for whether the latest area is going to appear, which will be down here. You can say, yeah, cut subtle colour variations across the whole thing. That's absolutely what we want. So that's fine. And I think what we'll do is we'll go back into the world here. We'll change this to a more sandy colour, like that. up the brightness of it a bit. Stop the render, start re-rendering. So I've now built this largely procedural texture which gives me gravel with a lot of colour variation. That I think will be fine for what I want to do. Right, so I'm going to get rid of that. Now we want another material, and this material is going to be wherever there's forest. And so I'm going to hit A for deselect all, and C for circle select. And there we go, that will do I think. So I'm going to add a new material. Oops, escape first, come out of circle select. Add a new material. I'm going to assign it. And you can see where it actually is. It's everywhere that there's trees. And this is our forest floor. So, and it won't be actually visible in our current camera view, but when we actually start panning the camera around, which we're going to in the next tutorial, it will suddenly be very visible indeed. So, new texture, image or movie, and as I said to you before, we've got that forest floor texture that I've created, and leafy ground, there it is, that's what it looks like, and it is tileable without obvious repeats. So now with tileable textures, never use mirror because it will ruin the tileability of it. Geometry, I'm going to make it affect the geometry a fair amount. And let's change the colour to make it visible in our viewport. Colour's going to be like a light orangey colour, I guess. And we want it much less specular than that. Practically zero specularity. And not very hard. Something like that. So, go to view camera. Oh, we can see a little bit of it, so we'll render that image. Ah, I forgot to do something. Just suddenly realised that I forgot to do something. What I forgot to do was actually assign that. So, let's do that now. See, that there isn't assigned. So I need to click assign, and I need to get rid of the lake. Or I can make the lake kind of a watery colour, I guess. That's probably the thing to do. I don't know. Let's just try rendering it. So there you are, that's what it looks like now, and I have played with the distribution of the shrubs and the trees a tiny bit more. I've reduced the number of trees and increased their size, and that looks pretty good. I've also I duplicated that rock and rotated it and stuck it over here, and the whole thing's starting to look a little more realistic now. What I need to do in a minute is change that rock there, which doesn't look right, it's too square, and although you do get square rocks in real life. Sometimes what you actually put in a picture, you can't actually copy real life because it looks wrong, and this here I think is one of those occasions, so I'm going to change that before the next tutorial. And that's it for this one. Next time I'll be adding the lake, adding some distant mountains, with also, well, bluffs with a tree on them. So there we go. Thank you very much. If you liked it, please subscribe.